Big news is made in Hollywood all the time, but the days don't come much bigger than October 12th, 1994, when three of the biggest names in filmed entertainment and music came together to form the blockbuster studio known as Dreamworks SKG. The S, Spielberg, the K, Katzenberg, the G, David Geffen, and the computer industry was involved in Dreamworks right from the very beginning because Paul Allen put $500 million into it. Dreamworks did not disappoint, and nor has its successor, Dreamworks Animation, SKG. Some of the biggest hits in animation have come from Dreamworks over the years, and we're going to show you a little bit of that on film tonight. In the process of making all that great animated film, Jeffrey Katzenberg and his colleague Ed Leonard, the CTO at Dreamworks, not only have made great films, but working with Phil at HP and others in the industry, they've pioneered a great deal of the technology behind these hits. And as you'll learn tonight, they're not only talented in their own right, but they understand and respect and are going to tell us a little bit about the history of computer-generated animation, which produces all of the films that we laugh at and we love so much. To guide us through the evening, we're delighted to welcome a trustee of the museum, Phil McKinney. Phil has spent the last 15 years in senior positions, 9 years at HP and before that at Telligent. So as you can read in the program, he has a very distinguished background. But the main reason that we were eager to get Phil on stage with Jeffrey and Ed tonight is that he has two other passions which are very important. First of all, Phil has spent most of his career helping organizations like Dreamworks discover and, most importantly, invent breakthrough technology. And his second passion is for innovation and how innovation works. He's got a brilliant blog at philmckinney.com, and I invite you to take a look at that. Finally, Phil is the author of a forthcoming book, Beyond the Obvious, Killer Questions That Spark Game-Changing Innovation, and that will be the subject of a book launch when the book is published next year. I'm hoping and betting that Phil will ask some of those killer questions tonight. Jeffrey and Ed, I hope you're ready for that. His first order of business is to come up with Jeffrey and Ed and make more formal introductions, so please join me in welcoming our panelists to the stage for this night's edition of Revolutionaries.
I want to take a little bit of time to introduce Jeffrey and Ed. Jeffrey, as John had said, is the CEO and co-founder of Dreamworks Animation. And for some of you may not realize this, but Dreamworks Animation is the largest animation studio in the world, having released 23 full-length animated feature films. And we all know the brands, right? Shrek, Madagascar, Kung Fu Panda, my favorite. How to Train Your Dragon, albeit I haven't seen Puss in Boots yet.
Waiting for. We need the biz.
It's on the docket for the weekend. But also, Dreamworks has been, and Jeffrey's been a leader in the industry, driving the technology innovations that we all enjoy, such as the first to release, all the films in 3D. Dreamworks decided to go full 3D, and the first studio to release 3 computer-generated feature films in 3D in a single year. Prior to Dreamworks, Jeffrey was chairman of the Walt Disney Studios. He oversaw landmark films such as Who Framed Roger Rabbit, Little Mermaid, Lion King, and Beauty and the Beast. Along with Jeffrey, Ed Leonard. Ed is the Chief Technology Officer at Dreamworks, where he's provided the technology vision and the leadership there. Ed's has enabled Dreamworks really to achieve a number of firsts. One is the transition from conventional animation to 100% computer generated, the adoption of Linux, choosing Linux as a platform for all of their workflows. Also, okay, we've got the open source community is sitting over on that side of the auditorium here, right? Look out, Ed, you're going to get an open source question. I can see it coming now. Globalization of the studios and tools to enable Dreamworks really to be the first studio to go 100% 3D. And so I want to do is, again, welcome Jeffrey and Ed to the Computer History Museum. So as John said, I'm one of the trustees here at the museum, and our mission here at the museum is really to capture and share the history of computing. And tonight we're being joined by Jeffrey and Ed, who've had an unbelievable impact in shaping the history of animation. This evening we're going to bring these two together. We're going to bring the history of computing and the history of animation together and chat about how this plays out, what's the role of computing technology and in the role of the animation, and how that all works, and really also get a chance to hear from really the two leaders in the industry about what's coming next, where's the future going. So to help get a grasp of kind of the changes in the animation industry, most of the people here in the Valley are probably pretty, unless of course there's Dreamworks staff from the Redwood City studio here, but most of us come from a computer industry perspective. And what I want to do is give you a little bit of the history as far as what has been the changes that have happened in the animation industry. So, Jeffrey, you know, when you think about, when I look back at your career, you know, what, it was 1984, right, when you took control of Disney Animation. What was it, I mean, when you think about the technology, did technology ever roll back in Disney? I mean, 84, there really wasn't much available to it, but.
Well, first I should tell you about my very first day at work in 1984. I had come from running the Paramount studio. I ran the live action division. I was 34 years old. I'd been there since I was 23. Had grown up through the company. My first day when I arrived at Disney, I went to Michael Eisner's office. He was the CEO of the company, and I'd worked for Michael for 9 years over at Paramount. And I came in with my to-do list of things that I, were sort of my priorities, and said, here's what, I think are the very first things that we need to sort of get done to get business up and running at the studio. And I had gone through, and he had said, great, terrific, and I had gotten to the door, and I was on my way out the door, and he said, hey, Jeffrey, one more thing before you leave. And I said, okay, and he said, come over here, I want to show you something. And we walked to his window, and he looked out the window and pointed to a building across the street, and he said, at the studio, and he said, do you know what you see that building over there? I said, yeah. He said, do you know what they do there? And I said, no. And he said, well, that's where they make the animated movies. I said, really? That's interesting. He said, yeah, that's your problem. So that was my introduction to animation. I was not a student of it. I really didn't know anything about it. Like, I think most people had probably seen a handful of Disney animated movies as a kid. I remember seeing Pinocchio and, as a kid, and seeing that and being, mesmerized by it. But I didn't really know anything about animation. Very quickly, really began a learning experience there. And the thing that's so fascinating is that one of the interesting attributes of many, many attributes, one of the really interesting ones about Walt Disney is that he had this amazing archive of his work product and the way in which he went about organizing and making his movies. And almost everything that he did was photographed, cataloged. There were people that went around and literally had these long memos that were captured the meetings and notes from his process of working with his animators. And so literally sitting within this incredible repository at Disney of this archives was a kind of a how-to manual. It was, I always used to say that Walt Disney left breadcrumbs the size of Volkswagens. You'd have to be deaf, dumb, and blind not to be able to follow his path of what the essential elements of a great animated movie, a great animated story is. And interestingly enough, at the very core and essence of these films was technology. Walt Disney, as some people know, was an amazing technologist. He loved technology. He had a huge R&D department on the lot. He developed all kinds of unique cameras and various devices over the years in order to realize the visions that he had for his films. And he considered technology to be, of the essence to the process of making those films. And so it kind of is in the DNA of animation, from really the pioneer of the business.
So, correct me if I'm wrong, when Beauty and the Beast...
Okay, here we go.
Yeah, right? I'm giving you the option to say I'm wrong, right? Jeffrey's not...
At least I'm not up here competing with Watson, let's be clear. That's a break.
I don't know if I take that as a compliment or a shot.
It's a shot.
But, some of the movies that you did there were kind of the first ones really doing experiments with CG, like, Beauty and the Beast, the ballroom scene, right?
Yes. Well, the ones that I think are, of note that people have recognized over the years is the first 3D CG environment created was the ballroom scene in Beauty and the Beast.
Mm-hmm.
And so what was so interesting to me, and is, in fact, again, where we are today, if you either recall that scene or you go back and you look at it, what is so remarkable about it is that camera move is about a soaring emotional moment in the film. And there was the state-of-the-art technology being deployed in the finest possible way in support of a critical story moment. And it actually created and amplified what the artists and the filmmakers wanted for that moment. It's a giant sweeping camera move down the chandeliers into the room as Belle and Beast begin this dance for the first time. And it so romanticized the moment, it so enhanced the moment of it, and that really was a real breakthrough moment. Another was a very important breakthrough for us was the wildebeest sequence in Lion King. And again, you think about just such a powerful and important emotional moment. This is where, Simba gets caught in this stampede, which ultimately, is responsible for the death of his father. And, just a very, very, very powerful emotional moment. And so this marriage of creativity and artistry and technology has been at the very core and the very essence of animation and our animation storytelling, right to today. You'll see it in Puss in Boots. There's really exceptional things that have been achieved by our technology department in support of the vision of the filmmakers.
So fast forward 94, you found Dreamworks.
That was the day I got fired. So now we talked about the day I got hired.
I'm bookending your stories here.
The day I got fired, right? Okay. That's a remarkable moment too. You think so? In 1994, the Walt Disney Studios had the #1 show on Broadway, Beauty and the Beast. Had the #1 television show on the air, a show called Home Improvement with Tim Allen. See, everything just goes around and around in our world. And we had the #1 movie in Lion King, and I got fired. Makes sense. It's Hollywood.
But when you started Dreamworks, you put technology right there as part of you saw the vision of what technology was going to do to enable that storytelling, right? So
yes, again, I have to say, all roads lead back to Walt Disney for me. I just feel like he was my tutor and teacher. I never met him, but I feel as though I had learned, through this great repository of his, all these great lessons. And yes, from day one, we were committed to creating a state-of-the-art technology campus that we built down in Glendale. And 14 years later, we continue to embrace, need, love, the newest, latest, greatest. You're on the receiving end. Do you know anybody who has a more voracious appetite that wants what you got first, free?
Yeah. Key word, free. So
we support it back.
So Ed, from the standpoint of, a lot of people don't realize what happens from the standpoint, why technology is such critical for DreamWorks' ability to create the films from a technology platform.
Sure.
Why don't you talk a little bit about what that role of technology plays? It's not just a back office traditional IT thing.
Yeah, I think, well, one of the first films that I worked on was actually that Wildebeest Stampede with Jeffrey at Disney. And I think from, the transition from that Beauty in the Ballroom scene to the Wildebeest Stampede, there was a change from an optimization and efficiency use of computers, digital ink and paint in the early days, to really a creative tool. And if you look at the arc of the last 15 years or 20 years in our business, technology now is rooted at the anchor of everything that we do. I mean, technology, the computer is our tool. It's the new pencil. And so for our business, staying at the very leading edge of what we do, bringing worlds to life in ways that people haven't seen before, new characters, and every one of our films trying to outdo the last film, we've recognized, and largely to Jeffrey's leadership, technology is essential for what we do. And it's, on Tuesdays, the tech leads the art, and on Wednesdays, art leads the tech, and there is this insatiable appetite for more, bigger, and better. And technology has really become an integral part of achieving, our business result and our artistic result. And for us, it's just sort of natural in the way we live.
So here's interesting. We made Little Mermaid back in the mid-1980s. We're making the movie, and for various reasons, not unlike, I think many things, we got behind schedule and over budget, and needed to make some simplifications for it. And the character of the Ariel, the mermaid, the design of the character in the movie, she, if you look at all the colors, because at that time, inking and painting was done by hand. So literally, there was a building where inking and painting was done, and for each movie, there would be these jars of paints that were mixed, big, depending on what was going to be used for. Some of them very large, because we had to have consistency of color from the beginning of painting a movie to the end of it. So for Ariel, her design for her character had actually 12 colors. The fins and her hair, the great red hair and her eyes, and the difference in her skin tone and her lips. So that was the color palette as she was designed to be made. We got, as I said, behind schedule and over budget, and we ended up having to simplify her color palette from 12 paints to 7. And that simplification ended up actually saving an enormous amount of time and money. So you think about today, a movie like Puss in Boots has a color palette, quite literally, thousands and thousands and thousands of colors. And that detail allows a level of artistry that was unimaginable. And you just think about the short span of how much it's changed. That's technology.
Well, here, I think you talk about an interesting issue, though, right? Because here you are, you've got artists, people trying to tell the story. They've got this great vision of how they want to tell the story. And you got technologists. I can imagine there's probably some pretty interesting conversations about vision and dream, and how do you bring the technology around to support that.
So people always ask, what comes first, chicken or the egg? So in this case, the answer is yes. So here's the way that works in our world. We have a group of artists, they come together, they're going to make a movie called How to Train Your Dragon. And the directors of the movie design a sequence, and they go, we have a dragon, it breathes fire, it's going to go underwater, and it needs to shoot fire. And they turn to Ed, and he goes,
Yes. I got 5 years, I'll figure it out.
Are you crazy? And so honestly, it's in that very specific instance, you think of the end battle sequence in How to Train Your Dragon, quite literally, you have toothless, fire-breathing dragon has to go underwater where the ship sinks. It's, and all of that created with a sense of realism. It's not realistic. We don't do photorealistic. We don't actually even really like photorealistic. we try and create our own reality. So there's a realism to it, one in which our audience feels as though that world is something they can relate to in it. And so there was a very, very big, very ambitious, never done before creative idea, important to the story and the storytelling. And we turned to our 300 engineers and designers in our R&D and say, okay, how are we going to solve this problem? And that begins a really interesting process that goes on for doing it. It also works the other way. And as you know, Phil, because you've been very much involved in a couple of very interesting and strategic initiatives that we've done where we've decided to raise the entire platform and to give it capabilities that'll serve across all of our movies. And those are some of the most ambitious R&D efforts that are being done anywhere in the world in terms of graphic imaging and digital image creation and how to have consistent color and how to really simplify the use of tools. And so God bless you. So that it does drive both ways.
Right. And Jeffrey's mentioning one specific example. Ed and I were having a conversation at NAB, and Ed comes up and says, Jeffrey's got this. And as soon as I hear Jeffrey's got this, I'm like, okay, uh-oh. It was when we started the work on the Dreamcolor monitors. Jeffrey wants this monitor.
Well, explain why, Ed, because it's a really interesting...
It's an important issue.
Yeah.
For our business, obviously, color is super important, and being able to walk from artist desk to the next desk and be able to see the same color consistency, going to our theater, see the same color. So as you approve one thing...
And going to a movie theater and seeing the color that was intended by the artist.
Right, and that's so... managing color fidelity across the pipeline, really, really important to us.
So just think about it. For people here, you can relate to, I don't think there's anybody here that doesn't have literally from one place in your home to another, the inconsistency on color, depending on whether it's on a television set or a PC or, on a handheld device or, on a, iPad. I mean, the inconsistency of color in the world is maddening if you actually care, which unfortunately we care a lot. So, Ed?
And so we designed a process around using normal CRT, $700 or $800 displays in our pipeline, and we got pretty good at it. And we'd have guys run around with calibration pucks, and we got to the place where we can manage color fidelity super easy and to a very high quality. And then somewhere along the road, somebody decided that CRTs were no longer cool and interesting to make. Everything should be flat panel, and so within about 2 seconds, it was literally like 3 months, the entire world just stopped making CRTs.
We bought like thousands of them and put them in warehouses because we went, oh my God, what are we going to do?
And the problem with the CRTs, the CRTs solved their problem. The problem with the flat panel displays is everybody's very excited about their cost and their thinness and their light. But color sucked, and color consistency was really, really hard to manage, and nobody seemed to really care a lot about this problem, and so the gap we were trying to fill here was a $700 monitor and then a $25,000 monitor that could actually do color. The middle went away when CRTs went away, and so that conversation at NAB was really a challenge to Phil to say, Phil, this is not only a problem for us today, but the world has a problem. We need to fill this gap. For people who really care about high fidelity color, can you help us figure out how to get a flat panel monitor that's not $25,000 that can actually replace CRTs? And that was one of many sort of collaborative development efforts that we did.
The interesting point here is, Ed's telling me this, color's important, color's important. I'm like, okay, how important is it? Really, I was nodding yes, skeptical. So one of my many visits down, I'm meeting with Ed and the team. And Ed's going, I'm going to prove to you how important the color is. So he brings up a CRT. He goes in and he just tweaked the color just a little bit. And he brings in one of his top animation artists, and the animation artist looks at it and goes, your blue's off by 2. I go, got it. I'm now convinced.
So the great thing about it, which is what we have found, and this is where both our sort of big, strategic partners in both HP and Intel, who I really consider like our godparents. One's a godmother, one's a godfather, in that what our needs are that we have today, we're at the top of the waterfall. And solving a problem for us today solves a problem for everybody tomorrow. And the fact is, if you think about it, having great color fidelity across all your devices would actually be a very valuable and a meaningful improvement to consumers and to consumer electronics. And so in the same way that people embrace Dolby for sound, we felt there was a way of getting, and so we created Dream Color, and Dream Color has actually managed to make its way out, hasn't quite made it down into the consumer marketplace, but certainly in the professional marketplace, many tens of thousands of monitors have been created out there and is sort of a building brand, and it will make its way into the consumer marketplace.
Yep, and and I think it's an example, of the partnering of co-innovating, bending on the problems that customers have. But the challenge, I think, or I shouldn't say the challenge, but when you think about there's an innovation rate that occurs inside the storytelling process, right? You're always trying to raise the bar. Shrek, Shrek 2, Shrek 3. There's an innovation rate in storytelling. At the same time, there's an innovation rate in technology, right? We got Moore's Law, we got Kepler's Law, we got all these things that are changing. How do you stay on top?
We have Jeffrey's Law. My law is more is never enough.
Yeah. The old proverbial story of whatever you build, someone will figure out how to consume it. Jeffrey has it consumed far before you ever build it.
That's true.
So there is this challenge of how do you stay ahead. So but DreamWorks has a little bit of a unique approach versus being the traditional consumer of technology. But actually, we talked about Dreamcolor, but there's other examples about how you drive technology. And I want to talk a little bit about this whole philosophy of how you bring the partners in early rather than just wait for it to be commercially available.
Yeah, I think for us, just recognizing that we can't do everything ourselves and really paying a lot of attention to the things that matter most for what we do and make sure that our limited resources focus on solving the problems that really nobody else can solve. And so partnering with companies like HP and Intel have given us enormous resources to help really focus on problems that, little Dreamworks, even though we have several hundred engineers, these problems are really hard to solve. And so really figuring out ways of leveraging what is interesting to HP in terms of the future of what's coming for their devices and their hardware and their software, and what problems we're trying to solve in filmmaking, there's been a natural overlap between what we need today and our willingness to get it in rough edges and to really collaborate.
Talk about cloud computing, which when we started actually in cloud computing, cloud was something that you actually looked at in the sky and it brought you rain. But to talk about sort of our...
So just a little context for the amount of computing that we need to do in animated film. Generally, a single animated film takes about 5 years to make, generally 200 to 300 people working over the course of that 5 years. And during that 5 years, typical films today, like Puss in Boots, consume about 60 million CPU render hours over the course of that film. Now, we have 8 or 10 of those going at once, so you can start to get a little bit of understanding of what the scale is. And so for us, early on, we recognized that we can't continue to expand and build our data centers on campus. They just are very expensive. And so we partnered with HP on something we called Utility Rendering Service, and it's probably close to 10 years ago now. It was really one of the first things we did where we didn't talk much about it publicly, but we set up a render facility at HP Labs in Palo Alto, and we snuck a wire over, and we did secure cloud computing through HP. And so that was a great experiment. It led us to discover how to do that for ourselves, and today, we're moving very quickly to most of our rendering to being in the cloud, over half of it this year in the cloud.
Right. And you were talking a little bit about, the compute time, the amount of complexity that, I don't think people have an appreciation of how, having now been involved with and watching, as a partner with DreamWorks all these years and seeing the process, the complexity of bringing it all together down to that final moment to render the final film. And here in this valley, we all ruled by Moore's Law. but, and Ed, I've heard you talk about this before about Shreks Law. So talk a little bit about how much compute went from the original Shrek film to all the way through the sequence. 'Cause I think it helps give people how fast, what the role of innovation in the industry here in the Valley has a play for you and your ability to do these films.
Yeah, if you look back at, just for comparison, Shrek 1 used about 5 million CPU render hours. If you fast forward 2 years later when we released the second Shrek, it basically doubled. And if you look at Shrek 3 and Shrek 4, basically every sequel doubles. So about every 2 years, we double the amount of computation, which we've coined Shrek's Law. And so for us, every film aspires to do a little bit better than the last film. Processors get faster, computers get faster, but we also use more. And so the idea of the cloud, which is really important to giving us creative flexibility, is once we're in the cloud, then we have the ability to scale compute with ambition. So we're no longer constrained to what's in our data centers. Building data centers isn't fast or cheap, but scaling into the cloud gives us a lot more opportunity to be
and because we only we have 2 movies a year, we go through huge peaks and valleys, and nobody can build for those peaks.
Right.
And that's why, again, sort of cloud as a commodity became so valuable and impactful for us. Just to put it in perspective for everybody, we spend about $1.7 million to produce a minute of film.
1.7 million per minute
of film.
So real quick, you all have your index cards. We're going to be taking questions. I want start picking up your questions and then pass them to the end of your aisles, and people will come by and collect them up. So if you got questions, here's your chance. Get them written out and pass them down. So, Jeffrey, you spent a good chunk of your career, people think of you as kind of a Hollywood insider, yet you spend a lot of time here in the Valley talking and looking at the latest tech. And in fact, I would argue over the years that I've known you, you're becoming much more, you're definitely coming to the tech side of the aisle. But I think of you really as being the person in Hollywood that's bringing this convergence, bringing tech and Hollywood together. Because it's not just what you do here, the work that you've done with Cameron on 3D, the two of you really being kind of the push behind 3D, not only in animation, but 3D as a whole. It's just one example.
Well, again, I'm fascinated by the power of technology and its ability to actually support and drive creativity. And the thing that I'm most excited about today is that I think if you look at today, where is the actual tip of convergence between really the state-of-the-art technology, at least for graphic imaging, that Silicon Valley is innovating and pioneering, and the state-of-the-art filmmaking and graphic imaging and creation going on in Hollywood. Really the two primary leaders and drivers of that have been Pixar and Dreamworks Animation. And it's, again, very much been in the DNA of the companies, even I would say more so because Pixar was drawn at, was actually created out of a very specific creative innovation in technology. But I actually think that today, which is why I find myself spending more and more time here, is I think the two have intersected in what we do, but I don't think they've converged. And I actually think we are right now at the cusp of a convergence in which the skills and the processes and the software that we use today in creating the work that you're seeing is about to finally move into social media. And there is going to be another great revolution that is moments away from happening, and where these two are going to converge, and we'd like to be somewhere in the mix of all of that.
So when you say they converges to social media, give us an example of what you're thinking.
Just the sort of the simplest way I can sort of articulate it and tend to think about it is that the revolution that has occurred for all of us in this last 10 or 15 years, which is these amazing devices that allow us to communicate, collaborate, socially interact, discover. What they've done is that they've actually put instantly in our hands and in our lives something that is text-based. So you think of the way in which what these devices have done and what they are today. They are 90% plus, if not more so, about communicating and collaborating using text as the way we do it. And I believe that the next great revolution for us will be when we move from text to rich media. Because text is actually a learned process as opposed to an intuitive one. And watching and listening are things that we are actually, they're instinctual, they're things we're wired with from the moment we're born. And I think that that's a lot of the genius of Steve Jobs and what he created with the world of touch, and how that sort of changed the way in which we now interact and use these devices. To me, the next big step for us will be moving from text-based communication, collaboration, information. Is imagine if you could do what you do in texting, or for certainly a good amount of it, if it were as simple and easy as that, and it was rich media.
Right.
It was talking and listening and watching, which are completely natural to all of us.
So this gets into another question, which is, you think about all of the things that compete for people's attention today, right? Movies are one, TV's another, the user-generated content that's on the web. How does Dreamworks stay ahead? I mean, you talk a little bit about the social piece, but I mean, it's the attention issue.
Well, again, it's harder and harder to compete, and it's part of why our attention is we continue to put everything that we can to raise the bar on these animated movies, to make them events, to make them really, really special for people, because if you don't honor your customer today, you go away pretty quick. And so our ambition in everything that we do is actually to amaze a moviegoer, is to deliver above and beyond their expectations. And that's a very, very high bar to have to create to. And Puss in Boots on its second week did as much as it did on its first week. That's 100% about word of mouth. And so, it seems as though we've actually, hit a chord in which there's something going on with people seeing that movie, that it's as good as or more than what they expected, and that has, caused that sort of the most powerful thing, which is word of mouth to go on.
Right.
You're shuffling your cards here.
Needless to say, we've got lots of questions.
Nice.
So here's the first one. Is Dreamworks keeping as good of records of its creative and tech process as the Disney archives?
Yeah, we're pretty good at it, I have to say. In terms of the creative process, the answer is yes. And think about today how easy that is. In Walt Disney's time, quite literally, there was a staff of stenographers who followed him meeting to meeting, and photographers that, literally took down every word that he said. Now, they don't take down my words, let me assure you. They're not that important, and they're not that good. But the filmmaking process in terms of documenting that and having that learning process, today, you talk about in terms of very specifically 3D, we have more knowledge, experience in creating 3D imaging than any other company in the world. We've made more movies in 3D. We have created more tools for 3D creation than anybody else, have more software that we've adapted, and every movie for us is a learning experience, and that reservoir is passed from movie to movie to movie, and that just actually doesn't exist anywhere else in the world today, and it is why, for those of you, if you do get an opportunity to see Puss in Boots in 3D, it is really, really, really a super high quality experience. It really, you can see the film, the cinematographer who did How to Train Your Dragon is the cinematographer on Puss in Boots. And so, he did an amazing movie on dragons and I think was called out and recognized for that. And he took that learning experience and now you can see him raise the bar even further on this movie.
Yep. So it seems like we have a lot of people in the audience who are all students going into the animation industry. So we have lots of questions.
We like that.
For advice.
Sure.
So I'm going to give you two questions. I'll ask them both and ask you to answer them. As a student animator, what aspect of technology should I be focusing on? And then a second question, this one kind of has a little preamble. As a soon-to-be graduate in digital animation and world languages and cultures, unique degree combination, what advice would you give someone starting out in the animation industry?
Well, first of all, I would say there's never been a better time, greater opportunity in the field of animation, and 5 of the top 10 movies in the world last year were CG animated movies. Mm-hmm. So we're no longer a little cottage industry, and we are no longer a niche, and we're no longer in a cartoon ghetto. All places that animation existed in for a very long time. And so the need for great talent in the animation field has never been greater than it is today, and there are lots of opportunities. And interestingly, the person who has the language experience is actually very valuable also because we actually translate our movies into 46 languages. So there's a good value of marrying those two skills together. And I would just say if you were today, you wanted to have the trifecta, it would be a quality artistic skill somewhere in animation. Now, you got to remember there are many different skill sets within animation, and speak Chinese. You're going to be in really, really, really high demand.
And a computer science degree.
Yeah, a computer science degree.
Well, so Ed, this question's for you. I have to do this, otherwise the open source guys will beat me up in the alley out back. What distribution of Linux do you use?
I think that's a plant from the Red Hat guys. That's what I think. We use Red Hat.
So you guys are Red Hat. Jeffrey, can you share your thoughts about the stalled adoption of 3D technology in the home?
Yeah, I think we have to it's a double whammy here. The first thing is that, we got off to such a fantastic start in the movie theaters, really driven, principally, first and foremost by really 3 films kind of launched it out into the world. Monsters vs. Aliens, Avatar just sent it to the moon, and then How to Train Your Dragon were really 3 very, very high-end quality experiences. Then, unfortunately, Hollywood came in, and there were some that saw this as just a opportunity for a quick buck to actually deliver a subpar 3D experience done cheaply. And you could raise ticket prices and make a bunch of money, and this is to dishonor your customer in the worst possible way. And so this incredible enthusiasm that existed for what was a really new, great innovation for an experience in a movie theater kind of got trashed. And so we lost the trust of our customers, which is nothing worse in the world that you can do in that.
Yep.
And we all got painted to some degree with bad work that was done. And so we're now in what is, I think, a slow rebuild in which we are regaining and re-earning the trust of our customers. There's some fantastic 3D work going on today. Great filmmakers. Marty Scorsese's got a movie coming out in a few weeks. I haven't seen it, but I've told that the work is just absolutely beautiful. Spielberg's got a 3D film coming out at Christmas time, and I have seen, and the work is outstanding. And so great filmmakers using these great tools will make really unique experiences to be had in a movie theater. So at the same time, the opportunity is there for the home. And I think that there are a couple things that are, holding the home experience back from really taking off. The first and foremost is not enough product. And so it's very, when you're looking at, high-end, television monitors, purchasing them today, making that investment, the incremental cost for 3D, you want to know you're going to get use of it. And the problem is that, creating enough hours of 3D, quality 3D to be seen on a television set is just not really kind of hit a level that I think has excited people enough. The drivers of 3D in the home are going to be sports, and that is where much of the best work is being done, and in video gaming. And then the real breakthrough will come when we start to have auto stereo 3D without glasses, and that's not that far away. And I think that's part of what there is something, going into a movie theater for an hour and a half or 2 hours and putting on glasses and watching a movie, is something that people, the stigma of that, I mean, has sort of kind of gone away now, and the glasses are reasonably comfortable, and, but doing that in your own home, you feel like you're a stalker or something. You just feel a little weird. I'm gonna put on glasses now and watch my TV. I don't know. So that's not that far away from, it's a handful of years away before we go to auto stereo, and I think that will allow it to, that and, as I say, more product.
So here's an interesting question. What is the backstory to the Dreamworks animated opening for Features? The boy sitting in the moon with the fishing line.
So the name Dreamworks, Spielberg and Geffen and myself were having lunch very early on, literally in the first couple of days of starting the company, and we didn't have a name yet. And we had asked our marketing people to give us lists of various names, and over lunch, we just started piecing things together, and really kind of gravitated to the word dream. It just felt because we felt what we were doing was, for each of us individually and collectively, this was very much a dream come true for us. Again, just to put in perspective for you, I go back to 1994, and Steven Spielberg had just won in March the Academy Award for Schindler's List, and he had put out maybe 2 months before I approached him about this. So Schindler's List, he won the Academy Award in March. In June, he put out Jurassic Park, which was the #1 movie of the year. David Geffen had sold his record company for the 4th or 5th time for another bazillion dollars to Universal, and I was fired. So it wasn't really a hard idea to come up and say, well, why don't we start a studio together? I have to say, what may go down as one of the great trades of all time is I gave up 1/3 of myself for 1/3 of Spielberg, and 1/3 of myself for 1/3 of Geffen. And who do you think got the best of that deal? we got together, and honestly, this really was a dream for all three of us to be able to start this company, and we had raised, with the support, amazing support of Paul Allen, close to $2 billion to start the first studio in 65 years. So we came out of that lunch with literally just putting those two words together, and then Stephen came up with the idea of the boy in the moon, and to tell you what he's fishing for ideas. So that was something that he actually came up with. We now have a Chinese version of it, and it's Po sitting there on the moon fishing for Chinese ideas.
I've got a question for both of you, and this will be a test to see if Ed does the true answer or the suck-up answer. So Jeffrey, you love all of your movies, and this is a question, it's not one I'm coming up with, it's one on the card. But of all the movies you've done, which is your favorite?
Well, I have twins, a boy and a girl, and it'd be like asking me which of my kids is my favorite. And despite what Time magazine says, I actually don't think it's true that we actually have favorites as parents, at least not in my household, that we love them equally and differently. So what I will do is, rather than tell you what are my two favorites, I will tell you two that have remained with me for completely different reasons. So the first is the story of Lion King is actually a story about something that occurred to me in my life. And the idea that underlies that movie, which is about a child going from being a child to an adult. And for most people in life, and it's something everybody experiences in it, and that we always look for those common human experiences, at the core of these movies. Again, thank you, Walt Disney. And so for most people in life, the moment of going from being footloose, fancy-free, in some respect a child, into adulthood, comes with the birth of a child, because now suddenly there is a human being that is 100% dependent upon you. And that's just that sense of responsibility is something that makes you grow up instantly in it. And it's happened to all of us, and everybody who has a child understands it. The other thing that happens, and again, part of the experience of life is the loss of a parent. And when you are no longer somebody else's child, it's just somehow or another it all changes. And I had not had either of those things. I'd had the birth of a child, but Lion King was about an experience that happened to me in my life, where I went from being a child to an adult. And it wasn't around either of those things, but that's how I related it. And so when I think about that movie, it just has a different connection and meaning for me, because it makes me think of that moment and that time in my life where I went from being a kid into somebody of responsibility. The other movie, which is from a completely different place, which is really my animation geek hat I put on, is that the most purely animated movie that we made at Dreamworks was a movie that not that many people actually saw, which was a film called Spirit, Stallion of the Cimarron, and there was actually a little clip of it today. And honestly, when that clip came on, it was like, oh gosh, I love that. So, it's a protagonist of a movie that doesn't speak. It's a silent film, and yet the emotions of the character in that film of Spirit, the way in which the animators were able to have us fall in love with and care for this amazing, noble creature for which, his spirit and spirit could not be broken. And I think of myself as a spirit that cannot be broken.
So Ed, what would be your most memorable or favorite CG animated film?
For me, it's Shrek. I mean, I think that when that film came out, actually when we were developing it in storyboards, just seeing the freshness of those ideas and just the irreverent characters and just really moving animation from what was really a very limited, narrow, kind of storytelling to something that was very different. I love that film and still do.
So here's an interesting question. Person who wrote the question says that Who Framed Roger Rabbit was a groundbreaking live animated hybrid film which jump-started the Disney Renaissance. Their statement, not mine. Do you see a similar paradigm-shifting technique or film beyond the current 3D animation style? Is there, when you think about that convergence?
Yeah, we're making one. It's called Me and My Shadow, and it's the first, and in many ways, it's a throwback to Roger Rabbit, because what we're doing is that we're telling the story of a 3D CG character that actually projects a 2D shadow, and the 2D shadow is being hand animated. So it is actually, this is the first film in which there is an absolute seamless and pure convergence between CG and 2D. And from a technology standpoint, without a question, it's the most complex movie that we've ever made before. And I hope if it succeeds, just as a visual experience, it's pretty sensational. The test work that we've done on it, does kind of take your breath away.
Question, does Dreamworks create the handcrafted sculptures during the visual development, or do you go straight to modeling from character sketches?
We actually, again, depends on the films and the filmmakers, but most of them actually love to see a sculpted model. So modeling is still, we do both computer modeling, but we also have a couple of artists who work in various construction materials and actually will build, real dimensional models of our characters, and even sometimes our worlds.
And we used to, it used to be a regular part of our process where in every animator's desk you would see a maquette, and they would spin the maquette. And today, of course, it's a 3D model, so they can see virtually reset cameras, so they don't need a physical maquette, but there's something very visceral about seeing, a real physical model.
Sometimes you just can't get out, you just can't let go of the old way of doing it.
That's right.
So Ed, how important is the need for software that implements the more advanced physical modeling, the recreation of the physics as part of the animation?
Yeah, I think it's very important. What we try to do in our films is suspend disbelief, right? We want to take you on a journey for a couple hours, and we want to sort of make you forget your real life and just go on this journey. And for us, if you don't pay attention to physics, and again, as Jeffrey well said here, it's not about physical realism, but you want to get it physically correct enough to where you believe it's water, it's rain, it's milk, it's snow, it's fire, all those things where, physically your mind knows what those things look like. So what we try to do is get the physics right and then stylize it to match our world.
Except for fire underwater.
Fire underwater is not, yeah, that's right.
Magic. So Jeffrey, the question in regards to DreamWorks, when you look at its market cap rather relative to Disney and Pixar, it's smaller. So how can a smaller company take the important technology and business risks? It's the size versus risk ratio. How risky do you go, and how conservative do you be for success?
Well, it's interesting. I have to say, I think maybe it's the inverse. The smaller you are and the sort of harder you try, the more risk embracing you tend to be. The beauty of DreamWorks is that we are, we have to be an innovative company. We are, we are risk takers in the best sense of it. Now, having said that, we've put out 16 movies, and every single movie, 16 out of 16 are profitable. But, we roll the dice on Friday night, 2 weekends ago, and, I've done this my whole life, and there's nothing more terrifying, I can't sleep on those Friday nights. By the way, there's nothing I can do about it, but it's just the most horrible feeling when, you've spent $130 million on a movie and another $170 million in marketing, and, you're just rolling the dice, and literally, they can tell you at 11 o'clock at night, you've just, laid a wet one at $300 million. And here's the roller coaster ride of it. So, we took a gamble on opening Puss in Boots on a lesser weekend. One, because there were a couple of other comedies coming out on the next weekend. Number two, Halloween fell on a Monday, which it hasn't done in a number of years. There's a lot of family product coming at Thanksgiving, so we felt if we moved up a week, we would get an extra week of playing time before the competition. The big family competition came in. And so we really sat there and did the math and said, listen, if we combine the 2 weekends together, we think it will give us a better platform. And we believed in the movie and thought the word of mouth would be good about the film. And so we opened, not this last weekend, but 2 weekends ago, to $34 million, which is, in the world of what we do, believe it or not, a very disappointing opening. And, people were expecting the movie to open in the $42 million. We were actually hoping in the mid-40s in this, and so it was a real disappointment. By the way, it was the biggest opening for any movie in the history of the movie business on the last weekend of October. So, whose expectations are cuckoo in that? Ours, yes, theirs for sure. In any event, so we have that, and on Monday morning, honest to God, our stock goes down 10-15%. I'm a moron, failure. We're out of the business. We're a dinosaur. Nobody wants to see animated movies anymore. It's the parade of horribles. I got on a plane. I went to China. And I think I'm kidding. I got on a plane. I went to China. I came back at 1 o'clock in the morning. I went to India from there. That's even further away from it all of it. Came back, and then this last weekend, the movie does $33 million, down from $34 million, and it's literally, in the history of the movie business, it's the best second week that any movie has ever had, other than when it went to a holiday. In other words, from weekend to weekend, without the next weekend being a holiday weekend. And so, in the history of the movie business, no movie has only fallen off 3% in its second week. Big film, released in a couple of thousand theaters in this. And then this Monday, the stock's up 12%. I'm a genius. Dreamworks is on fire. You're happy to have me here as a guest. Somebody showed up. This last Monday or Tuesday wouldn't have been so good. That's my life. It's tough. I'm not complaining. I love it. I have to be honest. It's what makes it interesting.
So
we take risks, and we need to take risks. And here's the way I always have thought about movies and movie making, which is, in order for us to delight and to surprise and to exceed the expectations of our audience, the requirement is that we are original and unique. Original and unique equals risky. If it's original and unique, who knows? There's nothing in the past. And by the way, it's part of the problem of movies today is because they're so expensive. you know, they're not as original and unique. There's more sequels and more franchises, and even for us, I mean, it's part of, you know, that is part of why, you know, we've relied on franchises also in this. So we're not immune to it, but, you know, so original and unique equals risky. Risky equals failure. Sometimes, not always, but if you're going to be taking risks, you are going to fail. And so what we try and build into every aspect of our enterprise, including the movies, is we can fail, and it won't destroy the enterprise. So built into what we do, what we ask our artists to do, what we ask our filmmakers to do, what we ask our technologists to do, is we ask them to actually take enough to build into what we do, enough opportunity for failure that allows us to have enough opportunity to take risks, that allows us to be original and unique. And if you take this out, this is finished. Mm-hmm. So it's of the essence for us.
Ed, I'm going to put you on the spot.
Okay.
What's it like to work for Jeffrey?
It's exhausting keeping up with this guy, you know? No, I think, you know, I think you'd be hard-pressed to find somebody who has, as you can see, more passion about what he does, works harder than he does, and, you know, and he's a great mentor. I mean, you know, one of the great things about working at Dreamworks is, you know, it's really one of the best places to work. You can feel that you're part of something special. It's a place where people aspire to come work, and they love staying there. You know, it's hard to get them to leave. I mean, it's a passionate place, and we're filled with you know, passionate people, and led by a guy who demonstrates his passion. And it's, you know, it's inspiring, and it's catchy.
So, you know, of the things that you know, I think of that I take a lot of pride in. There are many, many, many things, but I think the thing that's very near the top of the things that I take the most pride in is that Fortune magazine every year does a survey of the best companies to work for in America, and they have they publish a list and 100 best companies to work for. And for the last 3 or 4 years, Dreamworks has been in the top 10 companies to work for, and that's not something I get to say. That's something that is very much what the people that work there say. And what that means, I can tell you what it means for the company, and I tell you what it means for me. For the company, what it means is that people love their work. You can't be in the top 10 of that list. You know, literally, it's like, you know, drink the Kool-Aid time, you know, to get on that top 10. People really, really, really have to have a commitment and a passion and a love for their company. And so making sure that people love their work and love coming to work is a business strategy for me. Mm. And, you know, the average employee at DreamWorks Animation makes $120,000 a year, average employee, 2,300 employees. So by definition, they are highly, highly trained, highly skilled artists and engineers, and the company has to honor them every day, and honor their accomplishments, and recognize their accomplishments, and to ensure that they have the very best tools and environment that's going to stimulate and encourage them and inspire them to work. That is a business policy, a business directive for the company. What that means for me is I actually every day go to work surrounded by people. First of all, they're half my age, so I feel younger, and where that love of being there, that excitement, that enthusiasm is just, I cannot tell you. I honestly have the best job in the world. Being able to go to work and surrounded by the most talented artists in the world, and doing something that, and I've thought a lot about this over the years, that is really the most rewarding thing in the world. And so maybe it's a thing I can leave you with, which is that I would ask just everybody here, just for one moment, to do this, which is think about what is the most beautiful thing in the world to you? And just if you think about that, and I'll give you, it could be a person, a mate, spouse, a child, it could be a place, beautiful, beautiful place that you've been, the Taj Mahal, a Monet painting. There's so many different things that you could think about that are, in fact, in a way for you that when you think of and you close your eyes and you think of what's beautiful, what pops into your head. So for me, the most beautiful thing in the world is laughter. And the most beautiful laughter in the world is that of a child. At DreamWorks Animation, we get up every day, and our job is to do something that creates laughter. And so I don't know how to have a better job than that.